Welcome to another episode of the School Podcast. Today we are in Bristol at Bristol Met. Before we get into this amazing episode, we have to thank our sponsors. We have Gadget Line, who make world-class videos for schools and make this podcast happen. On top of that, Edurio as well, who are partnering with us for the next 20 episodes on the School Podcast and making today happen as well. So with that said, our first guest, Sally Apps. How are we?
Really well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we're getting to you first, and I want to quickly break down our relationship because I've known you a very long time. Just say, Sally, you were on holiday and somebody says, what do you do? How would you describe your job?
I generally say I work in education, and then I kind of wait to see how interested they are before I tell them any more, because people don't necessarily want to hear my life story. But my actual job title is Deputy CEO of a trust, the Cabot Learning Federation, and we're a trust of 35 schools, and we have schools that take children aged 2 to 19 across 5 different counties, and this school is one of them. So usually that's enough. If people push me a little hard, I'll say, well, basically I'm an English teacher. And I became a head teacher, and I now have had 2 headships but work across schools, particularly supporting head teachers to run their schools. And it's a massive privilege. So currently my responsibility is for all of the education in the trust, which means I'm responsible for the education of 18,000 children. Wow, 18,000.
Let's go back a little bit to the English teacher.
Yeah.
Why did you want to become an English teacher?
Because language is really important to me. Power and how language is used to exert power, and also how to unpick how language is being used to manipulate and kind of make you make decisions. That was something that I was really interested in. I did an English degree at university, and I was really interested in that. When I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, I wanted to do something that really mattered. I wanted to do something where I could go home at night and feel like I had done something to change the world. Always believed I was going to change the world. I believe that now. And I think that the work that I wanted to do was about helping young people to be able to see and understand and read the world for themselves, and know when they were being influenced, and know how to influence in a good way for themselves. So I learnt how to become an English teacher so that I could put the power back into the hands of children and encourage them to go ahead, be brilliant people who could go and make a difference in the world. And when I was a head here later, I would stand in a hall a bit like this talking to kids and say, I need to know that when you leave this school, the world outside gets better. When you leave for the day, or when you leave at the end of your school career, the world gets better because you're in it. I really believe that. And I want to make sure you have everything you need to make the world a better place, which probably sounds quite trite, but I genuinely think it. And I think that if you can make a difference in the mind of one young person, or in a group of young people, then actually we leave our society in much better hands.
So you work in, and you have worked in schools with quite high pupil premium. How important is that language then? How important is English reading, especially when it comes to closing the attainment gap? I wasn't going to dive straight into it now, but as you mentioned it, because I know it's a massive factor. Yeah. Can you talk more about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about supporting children experiencing disadvantage, and we talk about it like that in our trust. We talk about children experiencing disadvantage and put the word children first, so that we're not thinking of them as with deficit language, but we're thinking about them with asset-based language. So I'm a child first, and I happen to be a child with SEND, I happen to be a child who belongs to a particular community, and I happen to be a child experiencing disadvantage. And that probably sounds a bit picky, but it's deliberate. It's something we're focusing on at the moment, because we're trying to make sure that across our trust, with all of our teachers and with all our fantastic support staff and with our leaders across our schools, that we're remembering life can be really, really hard for some children, and they're children first. And sometimes they might display the way that life is hard for them in ways that are really not very palatable for us, or we might fail to connect with them. And we have to remember they're child first, and I need to understand where they're coming from, and then I need to be able to do whatever is necessary for them to be able to achieve well. And so yes, language is a part of that. How we use our own language, how we speak to and about our children is really important. I think in terms particularly of reading and that command of language and being able to read, it unlocks absolutely everything else. And that's why people like Ofsted focus so hard on reading, because they recognise that being able to read opens doors, and being unable to read is really significant. And you will probably know, if you look at kind of mainstream schools, alternative provisions, ultimately you look in the end at the prison population, the rate of
pipeline.
The rate of literacy is really low. The rate of oracy is really low. The ability to, I suppose the rates of speech and language difficulty really, really high in the prison population, like 2/3 or above, and all of those skills are linked together. And I think if we can help our young people to speak well, and what I mean is be able to articulate themselves and use their voices and understand the power they have, and do that in the light of being great readers, being people who can read the world around them. And I think like literacies are really important to me. So not just being able to read, but also being able to speak, being able to understand what you're feeling, emotional literacy, all of that stuff is about essentially what our curriculum is about. It's about know yourself, understand your place in the world, understand the world around you, make a difference in it.
So how long was you teaching and you started to think, do you know what, I want to work up in schools, I want to do different things, I want to have a different type of impact? Was that something you've always wanted to do? What did you start to focus on when you started to work into SLT? Were you taking care of teaching and learning, personal development? What was your responsibility?
So I did always want to be a leader. I don't think I started out wanting to be a head teacher, but I did always want to be a leader, and that's probably because I was one of those children who was like a bit of a natural leader, and I enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed taking responsibility, and I've always enjoyed helping groups of people to be successful. I wasn't particularly sporty, but I was good.
As we sat in the basketball court.
Yeah, it's not my strength. But I love seeing young people be really successful at support, and I really respect what PE teachers can do in terms of they can engage with and support young people who might struggle in other areas to be absolutely their best selves. The amazing things that you see in a child when they are able to tap into that sporting nature is massive. For me, I was more into like drama and music and literature and that kind of thing, and I was very lucky. I had lots of opportunities growing up to try lots of different things, and to know, wasn't that I couldn't do any sport, but there was a lot of the kind of team sports that I was less good at, and there were some things that I was a bit better at. But I always took a leadership role with my friends and in school, and I'd be that kid that would take a lead if we were doing a project, and I'd be really happy to take a lead and to help people to do well, to make sure everyone had their kind of space and their time, but to take responsibility if it wasn't going well. So I think I came into teaching, and I think a lot of teachers have that about them. Running the class, that's a big leadership responsibility. I came into teaching knowing that I would like to lead, but also knowing that I needed to know how to lead in education. So I landed in a school in Manchester, which is where I trained and where I lived at the time, and I knew I really want to be a leader, and I've been really clear about that. And I did something at the time, it's not a programme anymore, but it was called something like Fast Track Teacher, and it was designed to, you had to go through quite a rigorous assessment process, and then they said, well, these are people that we think are going to be senior leaders in the future. And that was partly because there was an awareness that there was going to be a bit of a leadership deficit within a few years, and so they wanted to be able to pick up people that had potential and help those people to develop. So I'd done that, and I went into my first school as a fast track teacher, knowing that I wanted to be a senior leader, and then I got put in front of a class of young people, and I had to teach English. I had to learn my craft. So at first, although I was interested in leadership and I was doing things in the background in terms of making sure that I was developing the skills, I was a teacher first. I had to learn how to teach a group of children, or groups of children. In some cases, I got the classic kind of bottom set year 10 class who had fallen out of love with education, school, certainly poetry, certainly Shakespeare, and trying to find ways to engage with those and understand those young people and say, actually, there's more to this than just having to read a thing and being able to parrot it back. Like, do you understand that this is about the human condition? This is about what it's like to be alive. That this actually speaks to your life too, in Greater Manchester at this point in time. And I really loved that. And I made it my business to be really good at that, because I knew in education, I wasn't going to be able in the longer term to lead people if I didn't really understand what it meant to plan lessons, mark work, connect with children, deal with challenging behaviour, deal with parents who needed me, deal with parents who didn't know that they that they needed help from school, you know, like all of that stuff, understand the communities that I was working with. That was an important part of that journey. So it was about becoming a really good teacher first. And then when the opportunities came up, I generally took them. So my career route was, it was a bit odd really. So the first thing that came up was being the leader of GCSE English, so Key Stage 4 English. So I went for that, got that. It was a small amount of money and a tiny bit of time to make sure that we delivered good results in GCSEs. Yeah. There you go, so did that one. And then something came up in a school that was whole school literacy, in a school that had a really challenging Ofsted experience, and literacy was at the heart of it. They weren't doing literacy very well in that school. A lot of things weren't going well in that school, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. Like, maybe I can help. I'm an English teacher. Maybe I can, you know. And I was the only applicant. Okay. And I did the interview, and they said we'd like to offer you the job. And in the course of that, the tour of the school and meeting the leaders, I really liked it. But I thought, I feel like they've got this wrong, which is really arrogant, and at the same time, it was an instinct. And so when they said, would you be prepared to accept the job? I said, actually, I've got a few reservations. I'm not sure. And they were really surprised because I was quite inexperienced, pretty young, only applicant. I think they thought, like, this is handy. And I said, I'd really love the job. I'd really love to do the work. But my worry is, I don't think that you have prioritised it enough as a role. So now that I understand how the role is going to work, I think whoever does this job, it doesn't matter if it's me or if it's somebody else, they're not going to have the time and the influence to do what you need in that period of time. Like, I think you need someone who's going to be working alongside the senior team or working alongside all of the heads of department. Yeah. You're going to need to give them some status and some time. So it's not the money, like, pay me the same money, but I think you might need to be looking at the status of the role, because I think otherwise it's not going to be a job. I will, of course, turn up and I'll work hard, but I think you're going to find I'm doing things, you know, at the end of the school day on my own, trying to influence people who don't really value it because you haven't quite pitched it right. Culture. Yeah, and it was a massive risk, because they could have said, I don't know who you think you are, but we'll just get somebody else. And what they did was to say, okay, well, interesting, leave that with us. And they called me back that evening and said, we've had a conversation, and we think that you've got a point. So we think we've altered the job, and it's going to be working in this way, like this, with these people. And it became part of the middle leadership team. So I started working alongside heads of department, and we focused really hard on developing a reading culture and developing literacy. We won, as a result of that, we won awards for literacy. We got the Reading Connect School of the Year. The librarian that I worked with, who was brilliant, got Librarian of the Year, and has now a really high profile. And the most important thing was that the school outcomes improved because the children could read better and they were less self-conscious about their reading. So that was my first step, and that was what was really interesting and fortuitous about that was a whole school leadership role. So maybe not at senior level, but it was whole school. And because I had to work out how to influence people who I didn't line manage and who were my peers, or, you know, influence people who were, I'm a geography teacher, I'm getting on with my life, why do I need to encourage reading? Why do I need to do this thing that you've said I need to do? But when you give people tools and they work and they make life work better, then they work with you. And so I learned how to influence beyond my role, and actually that's almost entirely what I do now and how I work in the school system more generally. So naturally, when you work your way up through these jobs, SLT, you spend less time in the classroom. Mm-hmm. How did that affect you initially? Did you struggle with that? I think if you are a full-time teacher, teaching a full timetable, year in, year out, the first time you get the opportunity to drop a little of that, to do something different, is actually a bit of a release and a relief. And I don't mean that in like, oh, it's great to get out of the classroom. I love teaching, absolutely loved teaching. But it is a full, hard, draining job.
Have a bad day, can you?
Yeah, it's you know, and if you do have a bad day, you're back the next morning and it's the same kids, and you got to put that right, whatever. And I did love that, but I think I found that stepping away for a little bit to be able to do something that used a different skill set, a different part of my brain, I really loved. I think when I stepped into senior leadership, which was a step up from there, and I took the next role, my timetable dropped considerably. And then I came to really fall in love with my teaching even more, because it was, I had less of it, and it obviously really mattered to do it really well. And I started to really prize it, because as a senior leader, you're often doing a lot of things at once, but you can't always see the impact of what you're doing straight away. Whereas you teach a lesson and it goes well, you feel it there and then, you get that instant feedback from the young people. And I generally enjoyed really good relationships with the students I worked with, and they knew that I cared about them, and they knew that I wanted the best for them, and I got a lot back from. I loved their sense of humour. I loved teaching.
Interesting question.
Yeah, go on.
Because you do a lot of work with adults now as well. A massive influence. Is it easier working with students or like kids or adults?
It depends. It's different types of hard. So
because the children, they do give you the feedback.
They give you the instant feedback. So if it's not going well, they will you will know. Like, I should have planned this differently, or this isn't going well today, and I need to hold my nerve. Or and I think. When I came here as deputy head later in my career, I taught here, and it was really important for me to be a good teacher and to be able to demonstrate to the other people, the other teachers that I was leading, I'm prepared to do this, and I'm good at it, and I will work on it and get better, because no one is a finished article. So I took my own professional development as a teacher really seriously, even when I only had 2-3 classes. I think it is different types of hard. It's exhausting. Teaching, it uses lots and lots of your skills at the same time. You use your intellectual skill, but also your social, your emotional skills at the same time. I think working with adults, there is, it's generally speaking more polite, but it's perhaps a bit less vibrant. And adults, you want to try, if you want a really, really difficult job, try teaching a room full of teachers, because they are the worst learners in a lot of cases. They demand the very best teaching. They know what it is that you should have put into the professional development session that you've just designed. And sometimes, now I work with head teachers, so I line manage head teachers, but I also direct and influence heads that I don't have direct responsibility for in the same way. And with those people, that's different too. So I can say this because I've been one. Head teachers have quite a lot of ego. You have to be really robust, and you have to really believe in yourself to lead a school community, and you have to be open to criticism, and you have to recognise every time I write something, that's going out to a whole community. Every time I say something, that's being heard by a whole community, and generally taken very seriously. And that you have to, what comes with that is a bit of self-belief and a thick skin, I think. But it does mean that you can be quite hard to influence. So working with head teachers, working with senior leaders in education, it's different. All of the different, I've loved every job more than the last job. I think my favourite job was probably head teacher, because I still had both connectivity with head teacher here, this school. I had that connectivity with children as well as adults, as well as their parents, and I loved that. I loved that immediate school community feel.
I think I mentioned it briefly earlier, so for everybody watching, this was at least, I don't know if I spoke at my old school first, or whether I spoke here first. But this was one of the very first schools that I ever delivered in. And I remember and of course I did quite a bit of work back then, and came in quite often because I was at university still. And even just now you're talking about it, I guess I have the privilege of seeing you in action back then. And it is true, everything that you're saying, but even your relationship with the students and staff and the culture that you created. Obviously, I've not been here for a long time, but I imagine it's probably very similar.
It's even better since I left. I loved it, but actually the people that came after me did that even better than I did, so yeah.
So how important is culture and stuff like that for a school?
Wow, I think it's magic.
How do you build it?
Yeah, it's magic, and I think that if you get the culture right in your school, it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you on other things. So the children in this school perform really well, they make great progress, and they are attaining better and better every year. And they do that because they are supported by a group of adults, teaching staff, and those staff who aren't teachers, who really believe in them, who don't make excuses for them, who have high standards for them, but also recognise it's not just high standards, it's high standards, high support. I am going to insist that no matter where you come from, no matter what your route is, literal or metaphorical, into school, that when you get here, you're going to wear the uniform, and you're going to wear the uniform in a really smart way, because it's how we show our respect for each other. I'm going to wear something really smart, because it's how I show my respect for you in this environment. I'm expecting you to wear a uniform, so I'm going to wear something that shows that I have also considered that. But if you haven't got what you need to wear that uniform,
oh, I'll get it for you, I'll give it to you, but you will wear it.
Yeah.
I will give you the support, I'll do whatever I need to do to make sure you've got what you need, but you also, I'm not going to drop my standard for you because I believe in you. I believe you're as good as everybody else. I believe that you absolutely are able to wear the uniform's an example, but that is metaphorical and symbolic of everything else we do. You absolutely can take an exam. You absolutely can get through a lesson. Here's the support that you're going to need to do that. And we understand, I think, we work hard to understand the lives of the children that are coming into our school and to understand what the genuine barriers are for them, and also all of the special qualities they have, all of the resilience, all of the ability to be really resourceful, the ability to decision make, the ability to influence them for themselves and other people. And we get to say, you're going to use that. We're going to make sure that you do that to a really, really high level, that you can compete with anybody else. You can go out and change the world. And if you're going to need some support, we will do all the things that we need to help support you. But ultimately, it's you that's got the rocket fuel. It's you that can make the difference. And I think that is culture. I think culture has to be modelled at every level. And I think it's in all the little things. So you can't fake culture. You have to be really authentic. You have to really believe it. We have a set of, in our trust, we have a set of values that we call the heart values, high expectations, so it starts with expectation, equity, the experience of all learners, resilience and tolerance. Those are togetherness. It used to be tolerance, and we changed that. There you go, that's interesting. We had agreed together that we were going to have tolerance back in the day as something to recognise the differences between different cultural groups and how we work together. And over a period of time, we came to a point of thinking, we just don't feel like this is a good enough descriptor anymore of what we mean. We mean togetherness. We mean celebrating our differences and being able to hold space with them, as opposed to simply have tolerance. So those are our values, and they underpin everything. And if we're having a meeting, or we're doing a bit of training, or we are making a decision, we do it in light of those values. And if we're not demonstrating those values, then we hold each other to account on it. We have conversation about it.
Not just something put on a website. It's something that you try and live by every day.
Not just a poster on a wall, but actually they should be the essence of our conversation. They're about our humanity, about our shared humanity, and the fact that I have responsibility for some things and so do you, and we together have got some things that we need to achieve, so we're going to work on that together. And I think that dialogue and being able to kind of create our own narrative together and I suppose hold each other up against our values and talk about what that really means, that is all culture, and it's as much in the little things as the big things. If it's about supporting children experiencing disadvantage, it's as much about the language we use when we talk to them, as much about the language we use when we talk about ourselves and to ourselves, as it is about the actual things we're doing. And I think this school does it really well. Definitely has times where actually they reflect and think, we're not getting this quite right, we're going to change this about how we work. But that culture that has built over a period of time with people that were here before I was and will be here for a long time yet. So it's a real community school, and it's very, very special.
Hi, I'm Iona from Ajurio. We believe in the power of leading through listening, and we work with schools and trusts across England to conduct stakeholder feedback surveys to help you find out where you are now and where you need to go next on the things that matter most. Get in touch if you'd like to know more.
So one thing that I feel like there's a common thread here as well. Obviously we partnered up with Ajurio, and you've worked with Ajurio, you do work. How important is listening then? Because we talk about communication, we talk about reading, we talk about culture, understanding the community. So how important is listening? It's not just for leaders, but just in everyday life as well.
Yeah, I don't think we're very good at it.
No.
As people, I think real listening is really difficult, because what you often are doing is thinking about the next thing you're going to say while the other person is talking. And if you're thinking about the next thing you're going to say, you can't be listening to them. But actually, real conversation is quite hard if you're deeply listening, because you have a thing you were going to say, and then you listen hard, and they say something else, and you go in a different direction, and then they challenge that thinking, and you go in a different direction again. And sometimes they finish talking, and you've got nothing to say back.
That's why I struggle sometimes doing a podcast. I blame my ADHD, but sometimes it's like I am thinking about the next question, but then sometimes it catches me. I'm like, and then they stop and look at me. I'm like,
I don't know where I'm going.
And then when we watch it back before we release it, then I'm like, wow, they said some really good stuff there, but I just didn't catch it because I was thinking about the next thing.
It's really hard. I think it's like conversation in and of itself is actually really it's a complex thing, and so if you're genuinely listening, you probably aren't talking or you're not necessarily ready to talk straight away. So I don't think we practice it well, and I don't think that I don't think it comes naturally. I think you have to really train yourself to listen well. And I think at leadership level, in terms of listening to and there's lots and lots of different levels of listening, or talking to young people, there's lots of levels of listening. I used to find as a head, I would talk about the fact that someone would come in my office with a problem, and they would say, I've got a problem with this thing, and they'd tell me the problem, and I'd be thinking, yeah, but it's also this, isn't it? It's also this other thing, which either is personal to you, or is an emotional thing, or is it's a cultural thing. We do need to solve this problem, but we also need to recognise all the different layers that it brings with it. And you're often listening on more than one level at once. You're listening to what a person is telling you. You're doing the transaction of the conversation, but you're also listening to what their heart is telling you. You're listening to the kind of the things
their
that are
body language, everything.
that are about them and where they're at. And actually, if you can meet that need in the moment, if you can understand it and recognise it and say, I think it seems to me that you're feeling quite worried, and I'm wondering if it's about this, and having that conversation, actually you can then solve quite often several other issues by understanding what the heart of the problem is. And I think listening in terms of that broad stakeholder listening thing, that like listening to your staff body, is quite similar. So you need to be able to show, I've understood the things that are pressing matters for you. Like, this is a difficult thing for you right now. I also understand some of the root causes of that, and I understand some of the cultural things about that, and here's what I'm going to be doing as a leader that's going to address that. Here's what I'm going to do to solve that thing right away, if I can. Here's what I'm going to do longer term that means that that's less likely to happen again. But also some of the issues that people are facing are things that we're all facing. We were talking before the podcast started about education funding and the impact of gaps in funding on provision for children and on the experience of staff. I may not be able to change the amount of funding that comes in, but recognising with a colleague that's raised it that I can't change it, but that we're in the, we're dealing with it together, it's still an active part of listening, and it's still better than me not acknowledging it. So some of listening is about acknowledging what the issues are. Some of listening is about being able to work together to find the answer. Some of listening is about just reflecting, just thinking about what might come next and being prepared to say, I don't have the answer, but I've heard the question, I've heard the concern.
As you said, just listening in general, just being there. Sometimes somebody saying how they feel is enough. And they're like,
absolutely.
I feel better now.
And so often, actually just taking the time to be heard and understood, this is from, this is our children, this is our adults in schools, our families, just taking the chance to be heard. Sometimes, quite often, people can work their way through to their own solutions on a number of different things if there's somebody that can hold the space with them and help to ask the right questions. And I think in all those different ways, listening is really critical. And also, sometimes people say something and I think, I've got that really wrong. I've been doing the wrong thing. I've been asking people to do a thing that wasn't necessary, or I've taken a decision that actually isn't the right one. And I think having the bravery, you don't want to do that too often. I'm paid public money to make good decisions. But if I can recognise, I think we might have got something wrong, then I absolutely should be able to say, I think we've got that wrong, and I think we need to shift and change it. And here's how we're going to work together to do that. So I think that's really important too.
You said it's not just headship, is it? But you said head teachers, there's a little bit of ego, but even whether it's in school, whether it's in organisations, why do you feel like some leaders avoid asking the stakeholders for feedback or how they feel?
I think when you ask, you make yourself vulnerable. When you ask, you sort of really, really should be making a promise to listen and to do something with what you hear. And that makes you vulnerable. Not everybody is kind. So you ask. Some people will say things, not often, but some people say things that are deliberately mean, and they perhaps don't see leaders as people. And I think we've seen that with some of our communities, some groups of parents, I think have in some of their interactions with head teachers particularly, have forgotten these people are people. I think, the social media doesn't help the kind of the facelessness of being able to interact online. I have been part of the kind of dealing with, supporting really, really great leaders who have been put in really difficult positions out on social media by somebody who doesn't mean well, and who doesn't see that person as a person who is ultimately working hard on behalf of their child or their children or a community. And so I think there is a vulnerability about asking, and you have to be able to sit with the answers. And for a small number of people, they don't want to know. There'll be a small number of leaders who don't want to know what people think. I've got my view and I'm just going to drive it through. And sometimes that works. I don't think it's reflective of the organisation that I work in or the kind of leaders that we want to be, but I think that there are lots of reasons why you might be reticent to ask.
Because there's a massive risk of creating an echo chamber, isn't there? And do you ever fear that for the trust, and what does the trust do? To not just listen, but also to bring other people in to get a better understanding, to make sure that you're keeping up together with the latest research, keeping up all of it, just so you don't,
come too insular. I think we generally, as a trust, as trust leaders, try to work in a way that is that uses different networks. So our CEO is the chair of a group called Queen Street Group, which is a group of trust leaders who try to talk together, look together at particular issues facing education. Everybody in our executive team, so all the people that in the education team that I work with, everybody is part of networks that are particular to their area of specialism. We work in all of our local networks. Quite a lot of our head teachers are the chairs of their local organisations of head teachers, and we do try to make the effort to get out and see and visit other trusts, other schools, to perhaps take in information and thinking that's from outside of education and try to work out how we can make that work. Our CEO has been to visit different businesses in the past and to look at how different businesses in different places have driven their strategy and what they chose to do and what they chose not to do. We're sponsored by the University of West of England, so our chair of our board is part of UE, and we take learning from them as education sector, but higher education really quite different scale. So we try to do what we can to bring diversity of thought in. I think it's also useful to sometimes lean into where there's positive echo chamber, which might sound a bit odd, but there are some things that are really important to us, like equity through education. That's the point of our strategic plan. We believe if we can do a really good job of education for those children that are experiencing the greatest disadvantage, we can level up and make sure that there is a genuine equity for those children by the time they leave school. That's really exacting, that's really hard, and it's not happening across the country at the moment. If we can find ways to do that, and we can kind of spiral up in our practice by sharing what's working where it is working, I'm okay with that being an echo chamber, because I'm also happy if we get to the kind of outcomes that are genuinely life-changing for young people, then sharing that 100%. Is going to be really helpful beyond our trust. So try to use it for good instead of evil.
What's one of the hardest things about your job now? Because you're no longer a head teacher, you're deputy CEO. What are some of the things that you really struggle with? Because I can imagine a massive part of your role is firefighting, especially when you've got, was it 18,000 young people? And how many staff as well?
About 3,000.
3,000 staff, 18,000 young people. What are some of the challenges in your job that you just didn't expect?
I think when you get to that scale...
That was a big...
I was just thinking, sorry.
Where do I start?
I think when you get to that scale, there's always something wonderful happening somewhere, and there's also something really worrying happening somewhere. And I think that's true in any school, actually, but I think once you kind of multiply it by a large number of schools, and in our case 35, that's the case. There's always something that you think, goodness, that's really troubling, or either I'm unhappy about that thing, or what a terrible thing to be happening in that community. And so there is a responsibility to carry the heaviest things that are in the trust. You know, nobody in our trust leads a school on their own. We're alongside them. If you've got an Ofsted inspection on, we're alongside you. If you're dealing with something really challenging within your staff body, we're alongside you and supporting you. If you've got something that's happening in your community, with your children, with a young person, then you don't do it alone. But it means that if we're promising that to people, then that means that I'm in all of that difficult stuff, not me alone, but as an executive team. We're working alongside our heads dealing with those really challenging things. And I think that one challenge is maintaining balance and a healthy kind of outlook and positivity, which I'm a naturally positive person, but if you, like with anybody, if you only see the negative news, that can be really difficult for you. So and
of course it depends as well. You say about, then we could talk about well-being. If you've had a bad night's sleep, or you know your children at home are not very well, and then you're coming in and you've got this, then it's going to have an impact, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we're all human, so we've all got things. You know, there'll always be days where I think, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I've got a really challenging day ahead, and quite exactly that. You know, someone at home is ill, or something's not right for me in terms of my outside of work, and I do bring my whole self to work, and I do lead, I hope, positively with my emotions, or at least in touch with my emotions and in touch with other people's emotions. And that takes its toll too. So I care a lot about the people I work with, and I want them to succeed, and I'm really restless and ambitious on their behalf. But that also kind of brings its own trouble. And I think that I go through it with people, and so I have to remind myself to step off the roller coaster rather than ride on the roller coaster when there's something happening. I think I do that pretty well, but that's a challenge. We say, like, what are the challenging things? It's that. Knowing when to hold space on something, knowing when to sit with something and not take action, I think is that's mature leadership.
Well, that's
and
quite
that's hard.
difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
I think it is hard, and I think sometimes, again, when you're working across that scale, there are people looking to you for answers at a point where you can't give them, or it's not the right thing to give them. And so getting to be okay with someone being a bit frustrated that you can't give them or won't give them the answer right now on something is something that I've had to learn. But it's also glorious. You know, if I've got 35 schools where 35 kind of troubling things can happen, that's also 35 marvellous, magical, wonderful things. And so when I leave here, I'm choosing today to go and drive to a school that yesterday had an inspection team in, and that was obviously quite a challenging time for that school. And I obviously can't share the outcome, but I'm going over there this morning because I want to go and enjoy the sunshine with them. I want to go and be part, choose to put myself in the way of the good stuff as well as the things that are challenging, because that's balanced, I think.
Yeah. Is that the bell?
That might be our bell.
We are in the school, guys, as you can see. Well, basketball court at the moment. So would you say that you're having that impact when you first started teaching to change the world? Would you say you feel like you're having that now?
Well, so that's so funny. I think whether I feel like I'm having it and whether I'm having it are two different things. So I think, oddly, I don't always feel like I'm making much of a difference because your feelings come from sometimes what's like right in front of you. And I think the kind of leadership that I'm involved in now, working with head teachers, working with leaders to affect change that's going to happen next, you're kind of putting something out there, but you're not necessarily always able to see it. Yeah, and I have huge influence, and I've sought that influence, and I want that influence, and I want to use it really well. Whether that feels like making a difference is different. So when I was a head, I could see the difference I made to a child in the course of a day, and a course of 5 years. And as a leader of a trust, I know that that's happening, but I also know, really, directly, there are no children in this trust that I directly have an influence on. The people that work closest to the children, our support staff, our teachers, they make the difference. And if I can make their job more effective, easier, more impactful, more cohesive by working with the leaders that lead them, then I can be really happy that I'm making a difference. And I'm making a difference to young people. So I feel very strongly that I am changing the world. I don't necessarily see that change as immediately as when I was teaching a class or I was teaching in a school, but I know that it's amplified and it's magnified. I'm doing it in lots of places at once, so huge privilege.
Do you still see yourself as a teacher?
Deep down, so I will quite often say, sorry, English teacher, about something. So I've probably even said it this morning, like whatever I'm doing, I will refer to the fact that I'm an English teacher because that's a part of my identity.
Amazing.
I don't call myself a teacher because that feels, if someone says to me, what do you do? I say, I work in education. I'd love to say I'm a teacher. I'd be really proud to say I'm a teacher, but the reality is I don't teach anymore, and that doesn't feel, it feels disingenuous to say I'm a teacher, because the people who are, who would say, when did you last teach?
Yeah.
Well, 10 years ago, actually. So and you know, I've got a niece who's sitting her GCSEs, she's doing her maths right now in her school, but I did some revision with her and I got to teach, and I had my own children and my nieces round the dining table while I taught them some Romeo and Juliet, and my sister walked in while I was teaching, she was like, wow, you really are in your element, and I was loving it because I don't get to do that anymore. That feels like a real privilege.
So do you miss it?
Yeah, I do miss teaching, and I would step in and teach again, but I also know that at the moment the choices that I've made and the influence that I have managed to gain can make a bigger difference than I could make as an individual teacher right now. So that feels, oddly, that feels a bit self-indulgent. I would love to teach, but I also know that it's probably the skill, like there's been a lot of investment in me over a period of time to be in the position that I'm in, and I have to use that power and that influence really wisely. And so at some point, I might like to teach again, but right now, there's a lot gone into developing the kinds of skills that mean that I can do this job and do it really well.
You're clearly very good at it too.
Well, thank you. I mean, time will tell, but yeah, I do enjoy it.
Time will tell. How do you balance though? It doesn't matter where you work in education. How do you balance life with work, children, your own mental health? Yeah. How do you balance it?
I've always talked about the value of Teams, not Microsoft. Microsoft Teams is good.
We're not sponsored by them, so cut that, please, Dave.
Sorry. But the value of like literal actual teams, the value of having teams of people that you work with and work in is really important, I think, for your mental health. None of us do this job alone. If you're a CEO, there are other CEOs across the country. If you're a deputy CEO, there are other CEOs across the country, and I work really closely with our CEO and with our COO and our executive team. We don't make decisions in isolation, we make good decisions together. And I think that togetherness, that's one of our values, is actually really important. So I have to recognise my role. There are some things only I can do, but I have peers who I can check with and think with about the decisions that I'm making and the implications of them. And I think having teams at school and teams at home and being prepared to be part of a team and step back sometimes to let somebody else lead and step forward and take responsibility at times, that kind of ethic, that way of being, is also true at home. So at home, I'm really very, very lucky that I've got two amazing children, and my husband does a lot of the pick up and drop off the school because the flexibility of his work allows that. We live close to family. My parents are really involved in the childcare for my children, and I'm really lucky with that.
Takes a village to raise children.
Yeah, and you work with the other people that you are working with, the other school mums, other families, and we try and step in when we can and see someone else is having a challenge, getting a child to a match somewhere. If we can do it, we'll do it. And I think you have to try to build and invest in community and in other people and in their families, and also then be ready to ask when you need it, because at any one time, someone can become ill, a plan can fall through, and I think you're relying on your team then, or relying on being part of somebody else's team, and recognising for all of us, we're all doing our best, and sometimes we've just got to give we've got to recognise we're trying to do the same thing, and we've got to give each other a bit of slack. How much that sense of even just balancing at home, balancing like the domestic work at home, how much more can I do so you have to do less? And if we're both thinking like that, it's okay. If both of us are thinking about how little can I manage to get away with, then that's not investing in our team.
Surely you have a cleaner, Sally.
No, it depends. If you like, my mum will come in and will say this place is a mess, and she'll do some tidying up. But yeah, we don't have a cleaner, but we do we help each other out a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's true at home, but it's also I think I try to operate that way everywhere. And the other thing that's I got really valuable advice. So when I worked here, I became pregnant with my first child. And the person who was head here at the time really believed in me and did a lot to invest in me and said, okay, I know someone who I think you should talk with. And it was somebody who was herself been a head teacher, had 5 children herself, had done that thing of balancing lots of different priorities. And she spent some time mentoring me and is still a really trusted, valued friend and colleague. But she was really, really clear and said, you cannot do 2 things at once. So if you are at home and you are looking after your child, if you are doing something with your child, then you're not working, and you need to be okay with that. And then you make your arrangements, and when you are not with your child and you're back at work, you're working and you're okay with that. And notwithstanding an emergency, being able to get hold of you, you leave that there, you do one thing well. And actually, that sense of not trying to, literally breastfeed while doing your emails and that kind of thing, which was what some people are trying to do. Like, to be able to say, I'm doing this now, and I'm doing that, then that being able to let yourself not do a thing to do a thing, and working out how you need to organise your life to make that work, that was the most valuable advice I ever had.
If you could have a magic wand and change one thing in education, what would that one thing be?
Inequity.
Explain.
I would make it that there was funding equity, so that so equity is about not everybody getting the same thing, but everybody getting what they need, ultimately. And I would make it that funding went to the children who most needed it, and to the communities that most needed it. That the best teachers with the children who needed to make the most progress, that the best leaders were in the places where schools were most reliant on education for there to be societal and community change. I would want to see communities getting kind of generationally more prosperity within that community because of education, and I would want the best of everything to be drawn to those communities. And I don't think we see that in the current system always. I've got one life, one wild and precious life, and I have to choose to use it in the best way possible. And I choose to work in these communities, in this part of the world, because it's near my own family and convenient for me, but also in this particular school, in this particular place, it serves the communities that I know might otherwise not always get the best of everything. I want to make sure that I give my best to those communities, and if there was someone better than me for this, I would want them to do that.
And if there was one famous person, dead or alive, you would love to sit down with and talk and listen, I'll give you more than one if you need to. Who would that one person be?
Oh, Lord, that's the hardest question I've ever been asked, and I should have known that I'd get something like that.
Well, if you actually listen to our other podcast, you know that question will come, okay?
I'm sorry.
First thing I asked
I'm
you,
going
have
to
you actually listened to it? No.
Not yet.
This growth mindset, I seen what you did there. I was like, no, this is awkward. So,
well, do you know, I'm really interested in Jacinda Ardern,
okay.
And I think I would want to know a bit more about what she's up to now, but also how she's decision made over time. How she, I think she did a real thing in terms of demonstrating kindness in her leadership as well as strength, and providing a different model for leadership for people to follow. I think there was potentially something about like knowing when to stop and how she chose how to stop, all that kind of thing. But I would be really interested in that. So, and she's alive, so that's possible. Maybe, I don't know. Since I haven't listened to your podcast, might you be able to make that happen? I don't know. But beyond that, there's a long list. There's so many people. Tim Brighouse was a really big deal in education. There are lots of people that I work very closely with who really benefited from knowing him when he was alive. I never did. I've been influenced by his thinking and his work, but I never knew him, and I didn't have that opportunity. That's perhaps somebody that
Give us the most random answer. Doesn't have to be do with leadership, education, just for...
Who would I like to meet?
Yeah.
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive.
Why is it not obvious to me? Like, it feels like there should be like somebody. I think...
Cameron Parker, there you go. You've done it today. Congratulations.
I can't believe you're going to give me Cameron Parker. I'm so lucky. I've got Cameron Parker. I've met you now. I've achieved now my life goals, Cameron.
You can retire.
So thank you.
That's it. Amazing. Thank you for your time today. I've absolutely loved even just coming back to Bristol Met. It's just brilliant coming back, seeing you, seeing how amazing you're doing, and being a part of the school podcast. So thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Cameron. Such a pleasure.
There you have it, guys. There's another episode of the school podcast. This was an amazing one. So please like, comment, subscribe, do all the good stuff, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
My name is Sian Lord and I help deliver the Girls Growth Programme, a programme that helps deliver impact for teenage girls, ensuring that they're happier and healthier on their school journey, with a big focus on relationships, friendships, body image, self-esteem, mental health and mindset.
I'm Natalie. I'm one of the leaders for our Girls Growth Programme, where we discuss important issues such as self-esteem, diet, exercise and confidence. Think of 3 unhealthy habits that you have for yourself at this moment in time. And when you don't get enough sleep, it's harder to regulate your emotions and small problems can seem much bigger than they are. Exercise isn't just about looking good or staying fit, it's vital for your mental health.
So get in touch today to get the support that your girls need now.